So as we all know, Alex Pereira is the new light heavyweight champion in the UFC, and the conversation has been really going around in the MMA community. It's been one big question. Is Alex Pereira the new greatest combat sports athlete of all time? Now, I gotta say, long story short, I just might think so, but I wanted to take this video and kind of think in real time with you because I pulled up, in my opinion, what the greatest fighters of all time are, and we're going to take a look at the records and kind of compare them. I didn't think about this before the video. I thought it'd be fun for the video, taking a look at it, kind of reacting to it, and kind of like getting a gauge on my opinion here because I just started thinking about it because, of course, everybody else is talking about it. I'd love for you to hear me out, and I'd love to know what you guys think in the comments down below afterwards. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another video. If you are new here, my name is Kyle. I'm your guy with too many YouTube channels. Let's talk about Alex Pereira. Let's take a look at the records here. So I have all the records up here, and we're going to go through the different fighters, but I do want to start you off with Alex Pereira because, of course, what makes one of the greatest fighters in the UFC, right? What makes the greatest combat sports athlete of all time? Not just the GOAT, right? Not just the greatest of all time, the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. The reason why Alex Pereira is now in this conversation is, of course, because he has had 2 title wins in 2 really tough divisions against 2 amazing opponents. But not only that, he has a huge glory record. Like, take a look at all this. And he was a champion in there. And he already, not to talk about, like, he beat Israel Adesanya in glory too. Like, he is a very credentialed in kickboxing. He has huge credentials in kickboxing, excuse me. And when you come into the UFC, take a look at this record. At UFC 268, he started off with, okay, you know what? It was a nice highlight win. But then, take a look at these wins. Bruno Silva, Sean Strickland, of course. How well has that aged, by the way? Sean Strickland, the current champion. Israel Adesanya, a guy that nobody was touching. Very few people had close fights with Israel Adesanya. Beat Israel Adesanya in the 5th round, came back, of course, had a little bit of a hiccup there, but then he took on another former champion in a new division and beat Jan Blachowicz, but then now he beat Yuri Prochazka and got the light heavyweight championship. He is a 2-division champion in the UFC. But it's not just the record that really makes me sit back and think, like, when we're talking about, and I'm kind of mixing, like, the greatest of all time with the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. I understand, like, there's a difference when you're talking in there, because if you're talking about the GOAT of MMA, of course, you can bring Alexander Volkanovski into the mix, or Islam Makhachev, excuse me, right? But here's the problem that I'm having, right? He lost Israel Adesanya recently really bad, and Israel Adesanya was beating him in the first fight. Jan Blachowicz was a very close fight. Some people think Jan Blachowicz won. I thought Alex Pereira edged that out, and Yuri Prochazka has been coming back off of a very long layoff, and to be honest with you, Yuri Prochazka did look rusty. I don't mean to say this and really take away from Alex Pereira. At the end of the day, he's a light heavyweight champion, and he was the middleweight champion, right? So I want to compare that to other records, because let's take a look at the other people that talk about, like, greatest combat sports athlete of all time. You got to talk about GSP. GSP, of course. Just take a look at GSP's record. But the problem is, when you talk about these older fighters, the opponents that they took on don't typically stack up to the opponents that people take on today. Like, I would argue, for example, like, if you want to take just recent opponents, like Khabib taking on versus George St. Pierre, Khabib's recent opponents just completely outshine George St. Pierre's opponents. You know what I mean? Same with Alex Pereira. But George St. Pierre kind of stands out from these other fighters because you have amazing fighters in themselves, right? But the problem is, how well would these fighters do today? Michael Bisping was a very good fighter, but would Michael Bisping really stack up to the middleweight division now? I honestly wouldn't say so. Johnny Hendricks, absolutely great win. Nick Diaz, great win. Carlos Condit, amazing win. Like, these 3 wins here were amazing, and they stack up to the record kind of like Alex Pereira, but then again, there was only one former champion on there, right? That's being Johnny Hendricks and Michael Bisping, of course. But the other thing about this is, and the elephant in the room that I forgot to talk about is, George St. Pierre was also a 2-division champion, right? He went up in weight, took on Michael Bisping. That's awesome. Like, that, I thought Michael Bisping was going to destroy him, and he just proved me wrong completely. But other than that, you have to go back. Like, Thiago Alves is a good fighter. Dan Hardy's okay. Josh Koscheck, Jake Shields. Like, you're getting a little bit lower on the scale here if you want to talk about the records. But the thing is, George St. Pierre only really has this MMA record to stand out. You know what I mean? There's nothing really else to talk about him. Like, the Matt Hughes wins were good, but then would Matt Hughes really stack up in today's division? I don't know. So let's take a look at another fighter, that being, of course, Khabib Nurmagomedov. I don't think Khabib is the greatest of all time. I don't think he's the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. That's for sure. Because, of course, his record. That's a big problem. That is a big problem. He's had some nice wins. Rafael dos Anjos, Michael Johnson, Edson Barboza, Conor McGregor, Dustin Poirier, Justin Gaethje. The thing with Khabib is he has looked nothing but absolutely dominant in these fights. Nobody was able to touch Khabib. Like, I don't even remember. I'd have to rewatch it, but I don't even know if I would give Justin Gaethje or Conor McGregor one round against Khabib. The dude has never bled in there. So when you're talking about greatest combat athletes of all time, I don't know. Like, he's just so dominant, and that's why it's really tough. He hasn't had a close fight. And would he have a close fight? Like, I don't know. Let's take a look at the record, like the UFC rankings for a second. If you were to put Khabib up against any of these other fighters, honestly, I would pick Islam to beat Khabib. I really, really would. Charles Oliveira, that's a toughie. Justin Gaethje, Dustin Poirier, of course, we've already seen. He'd probably beat Dariush. He'd probably beat Chandler. Gamrot would be interesting, but I would pick Khabib to beat him. Fiziev he would beat. Arman Tsarukyan, of course, that is the big question right there. And of course, you get to the rest of the division, of course, Khabib would kind of stomp him all. But would Khabib still be champion, like if he wasn't training with Islam Makhachev? Like, I don't know. Khabib left a little too early, and he hasn't taken on the right level of competition, in my opinion. Especially, like, to be the greatest of all time, that's one thing, right? But to be the greatest combat sports athlete of all time, I don't think Khabib stacks up. I really don't. But let's talk about one more fighter, that being Jon Jones, who does stack up. In my opinion, he should be DQ'd immediately for the PED use. Immediately. But I'm just going to talk about Jon Jones because, of course, most people, for some reason, disagree with me about that. So, hey, we're going to talk about it. Of course, the elephant in the room is Jon Jones is also a 2-division champion, and he destroyed Ciryl Gane. Ciryl Gane is not a nobody. Ciryl Gane is a fantastic heavyweight fighter. I really do believe that, and I think people are really, really underestimating that win from Jon Jones. He made easy work of Ciryl Gane. Of course, we all know he lost to Dominic Reyes, but other than that, it's been nothing but dominance. But here's the thing, okay? Here's the thing. Jon Jones has had a lot of close fights. He doesn't have nearly the dominance that Khabib had, that GSP had, right? He doesn't have that dominance, but then you go back to Alex Pereira's record, and I kind of feel like it's the same thing with the asterisks there, where, yeah, he beat Sean Strickland. He had a tough time with Israel Adesanya. He had a tough time with Jan Blachowicz. He even had a tough time with Yuri Prochazka. So Jon Jones has a little bit of a comparable record, in my opinion. Because if you would take a look, of course, Alexander Gustafsson, very close fights. Daniel Cormier, some very close fights, although he did get the better of Daniel Cormier. Glover Teixeira, that win aged extremely well. But then you get to the rest of his record, and the competition level is just nowhere near these other fighters, right? They're all the old school fighters that I was talking about. It's not like having a couple wins like GSP. You have to really, really get into like 2014, where his wins get kind of really good. But then even in recent times, he lost to Dominic Reyes. Thiago Santos is washed. Anthony Smith is also washed. And this was a washed Alexander Gustafsson. So how much do you really want to take that into consideration? Because he beat up Alexander Gustafsson, won the light heavyweight championship. What does that really do? You know what I mean? Like, these fights have been really, really easy for him until he ran into Dominic Reyes. And the Dominic Reyes win hasn't also aged well. So that's a tough thing. But at the end of the day, like I was talking about Alex Pereira, at the end of the day, he is the 2-weight champion. So you have to include him, right? Now, this is where you guys are going to disagree with me, because you want to talk about greatest combat sports athlete of all time. You got to look at Henry Cejudo. Now, big problem. Like Alexander Volkanovski in recent times, Henry Cejudo has just put a big damp on his record. That being the loss to Aljamain Sterling. This fight was so close, it could have honestly gone either way. I remember the fight ending, and I was like, I don't even know who won. Like, it was such a beautiful technical battle, and I enjoyed watching it. But Aljamain Sterling won on the night. If this fight wasn't here, I would say that Henry Cejudo has a better record than Alex Pereira, and he is the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. I would. How well has all these aged, right? Of course, you have the couple losses here. The Joseph Benavidez fight was very, very close. If I'm not mistaken, I'd have to rewatch it, and I thought Joseph Benavidez did win that fight. Besides the Wilson Reyes, right? Sergio Pettis, Bellator champion, insanely dominant. Insanely. Like, Sergio Pettis is miles ahead of his brother. Mighty Mouse. He did win this fight. I understand it was a split decision. I thought it was clear that he won this fight. TJ Dillashaw, a sauced up TJ Dillashaw. And I understand TJ Dillashaw was a little bit drained in this fight, but still, it was TJ Dillashaw moving down in weight. Marlon Moraes was a killer. When he was in the UFC. Always dangerous. Then Dominic Cruz. People talk about being the greatest bantamweight of all time. I would say that these wins here are better than Alex Pereira's wins. I really do, because, of course, Henry Cejudo, when you go back to his record, he beat Sergio Pettis. He beat Demetrius Johnson. He beat TJ Dillashaw. He beat Marlon Moraes. He beat Dominic Cruz. There isn't controversy here. There is no controversy there, but the problem is he lost to Aljamain Sterling. You go back to Alex Pereira, again, the people talking about the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. Sean Strickland, win. Israel Adesanya, close fight. Israel Adesanya, lost. Jan Blachowicz, controversy. Yuri Prochazka, asterisk, because, of course, Yuri was rusty and he had trouble in that fight. So that's why it's really, really tough. When taking a look at all of these records right now, I have Alex Pereira, GSP, Khabib, John Jones, Henry Cejudo. Who is the greatest combat sports athlete of all time when it comes to these fighters specifically? I think we need to get rid of Khabib, just because the competition level wasn't there, and while he was dominant, I would need to see more from him. I want to eliminate John Jones, because John Jones and his PED use, and honestly, those wins haven't aged well. That leaves me with GSP, also a two-weight champion. Something that I completely forgot to talk about, when the reason why I'm about to eliminate GSP, I don't know why I completely forgot to talk about it, my apologies. Henry Cejudo is also an Olympian. You know Triple C? The gold medal? So how do you want to look at this? I think it's between these two personally, Alex Pereira and Henry Cejudo. Henry Cejudo is a gold medalist in wrestling. That's crazy, but then if you want to talk about that, you could also bring up Daniel Cormier, but I wouldn't. The reason I didn't bring up Daniel Cormier is because Daniel Cormier ended his career not so great. Kind of like Henry Cejudo, but a little bit worse, to be honest with you. So, it all depends. Do you want to take a glory champion or do you want to take an Olympian? Guys, I'm honestly going to take an Olympian. I really am. As of right now, my conclusion is Henry Cejudo is the greatest combat sports athlete of all time, but Alex Pereira has nothing but time. Nothing but time. If he continues to rack up wins in this division, if he continues to beat a guy like Alexander Rakic, if he continues to go and destroy Israel Adesanya again, I shouldn't say destroy, and if he continues to go and beat Jamal Hill, if he starts stacking up more wins in that division and keeps defending his belt, there will be no question that he's the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. There's no question about it. And Henry Cejudo is fighting Marab. If Henry Cejudo comes in and loses, he's going to be completely off the list. If Henry Cejudo loses his next fight, I would say give it to Alex Pereira. But then again, what happens if Alex Pereira loses, right? So as of right now, as of this moment, on November 11th of 2023, or 13th, excuse me, I looked at the month, I believe Henry Cejudo is still the greatest combat sports athlete of all time. That's why. But of course, this isn't just up to me. The whole point I made this video is I just wanted to talk about it, and I'd love to hear from you guys in the comments section down below. I'm prepared to hear the backlash. I'm prepared to hear you guys talking how Henry Cejudo could possibly be the greatest combat sports athlete of all time, but I really do believe that. Regardless, it's close. It's between Alex Pereira and Henry Cejudo. Guys, let me know what you think down below. Thank you so much for watching this video on the screen right now. If you'd like to continue watching the Clenbat channel, there'll be 2 videos for you to take a look at on screen. I will see you either there or in the next video, guys. Take care.